It's official. Russia's authorities admitting that Russia is on the edge of a recession. I anticipate that this level of military spending will remain even if the war ends tomorrow. China quite successfully substituted European countries and European firms in terms of Russian imports and provides to Russia its market to sell hydrocarbons.
Russia is one of the most sanctioned countries on earth, and now its own Minister for Economic Development is warning that the country is teetering on the edge of recession. For more on the state of the Russian economy, I'm joined by Alexandra Prokopenko. She's a fellow at the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Center. Alexandra, thank you for joining us. And I want to start with these comments from the Russian Minister of the Economy. They came recently, and how bad is it that a member of Putin's own government is admitting this kind of news?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And second, it was anticipated. And I think here now we can say that it's official. Russia's authorities admitting that Russia is on the edge of a recession. In terms of Russia, this kind of recession doesn't mean the same as it is for instance, developed economies. So it wouldn't go with massive unemployment because Russia's unemployment now is 2.3%, and that's the historical low level, which basically means that there is not enough workers for the economy. So there is a limitation why the economy couldn't grow anymore. And second, I do not anticipate the surge of inflation. But here, Russia's economy was overheated previously. It grew in 2024 by 4.3%. And now, it's cooling down. And technically, there would be a recession, so shortage in the first quarter. Economy grew only 1.4%. Compared to previous quarters, it was a contraction. And in second quarter, we see business survey, we see some forward-looking indicators that showing that in the second quarter, the economic activity was low. So 2 quarters in a row, it means technical recession. But for Russia's economy, as I said, it mostly means that the economy is going back, returning to its potential growth trajectory, which is near 1 or 1.5%. The key trade-off for Russian government here is to stick with the rosy figures, and as we also saw last week at St. Petersburg Forum, Vladimir Putin likes to brag on how Russia's economy doing great over all these sanctions, over all this pressure, or to I don't know how to say, how better to frame it, or to put economy on a more healthy footage, which means that economic growth would be, I think, 1 or 1.5%. Putin already signaled to his economic bloc that he would be okay with low figures. So I think recession for now also will mean, of course, a diet in terms of spending in 2026.
I think there is some suspicion from viewers in the West about the news coming out of Russia, but it does seem like since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine that the economy has been chugging along. So if we unbraid this a little bit, what are the factors keeping the Russian economy moving?
Well, there are 3 pillars which keeps a Russian economy afloat. First is massive state spending, the fiscal and credit impulse, which means injected money into economy. During last 3 years, exceeded 10% of GDP. It's enormous figure. Russian state never spent so much. Of course, big part of this spending went directly into the army, into military industry complex. But the rest of economy also got part of this money, and that was that's the first pillar. Second is market structure of the economy, which gives economic agent options to adjust as quick as possible to changing reality. That's why Russia adjusting to sanctions quite quickly. I can give you an example. For instance, the most recent sanctions package, which was rolled out by leaving Biden's administration in January, well, this was sanctions on Russia's oil, on Russian tankers and shadow fleet, and they were effective, I think, 3 weeks. And then the economy adjusted, they rerouted they rerouted flows, they've got new intermediaries in terms of transactions, and the effect of sanctions faded away. So, and that's all because market economy. And third pillar is a lifeline provided by China, and China quite successfully substituted European countries and European firms in terms of Russian imports, and provides to Russia its market to sell hydrocarbons. And all of these three factors are a combination, and they keeping Russian economy afloat, and they are still there. But I need here to point that there are two very important limitations for Russia's economy. And first, I mentioned already, it's low unemployment, which means that there is not enough workers. And second, Russia's industry works on its maximum capacity. There is no free capacity left, which means that Russian industry cannot increase output. That's why economy couldn't grow, and that's why economy now is contracting.
You mentioned three very important points there, but I want to stick with the military and defense spending for a moment, because since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has ramped up its military spending. We can see some of these figures here from 2024 and draft figures from 2025 onwards. We can see that the national defense accounts for about 30% of the annual national budget. When we look at these numbers, who's benefiting from this?
Well, mostly Ministry of Defense. They've got the big slice of this pie. Then also other enforcement agencies like Federal Security Services, Penitentiary System, and others. So combined military spending and spending on national security now are near 7.7% of GDP this year. And I think, as far as I understand Russia's economic policy, it is a consensus among Russian economic bloc that relatively this level of expenditures on military and security will persist at least in 2026 and 2027. So we can say that in 2026, Russia will spend on military 6 or 7% of GDP. I think near similar figures will go to social spending, and the rest will go to the rest of the economy, which means that the civil part of the economy will put on a diet after 3 years of constant spending. Well, in terms of people, it means that people will see that their life is not, that their life quality is not increasing with such a pace. They will see that inflation, which already tamped by a high key rate by central bank in Russia, it's now 20%, that inflation biting. But yeah, that's what I think in terms of macro, that's what economy needs. But what's important here, I think, is that I anticipate that this level of military spending will remain even if the war ends tomorrow. So when guns go silent, military industry complex will continue to work maybe around the clock, because Putin wants to reconstitute its military potential. And the current stats at the front line raise important dilemmas to which extent he wants to reconstitute Russia's military power.
The second pillar that you mentioned was this idea that sanctions are only working for a short amount of time, at least in that most recent example you gave. I'm wondering, has the West and its allies, have they miscalculated sanctions, or why are they not working?
Speaking on sanctions, I think there is a combination of factors. Some of them were miscalculated by policymakers, and as we remember that Western coalition was in a rush to introduce new, more and more sanctions, and Russia, for the opposite, Russian businesses and Russian authorities started their day with thinking how they can adjust the economy, how they can adjust their life into sanctions. So it was always a cat and mouse game. I think some sanctions, like financial sanctions, could came earlier, and the picture would be absolutely different. And the very important issue, which was not taken into account, that sanctions are not supported by the whole globe. I mean, it wasn't a full trade embargo, but it was embargo by the western part of the world, and eastern part of the world enjoyed their privileged position to sell their stuff to Russia and profiteering on this. And as I mentioned, the role of China here is super important.
You mentioned inflation, and the figure that you cited, 9.5% inflation, is also what I've been reading. And like you mentioned, the Russian central bank has decided to keep its key interest rate steady at 21%, but that's still double digits. Many would consider that in other countries an eye-watering figure. But what does it tell us about the health of the economy?
It definitely a sign that economy is not in a healthy stance. And even before that, when the growth figures were 4.3% and the key rate was 21%, that was an indicator which showed us that there is something wrong. Because if you have health growth, you don't need this kind of this high interest rate. So the economy is still it's not doing well, but it's not at the but it's not collapsing. It's also important to understand when we're speaking about Russia's economy. Central bank said that they are not considering disinflationary pressure as sustainable. That's why they decided to keep the rate, and that's a decision made unhappy real sector and manufacturers who want cheap loans. But we see that central bank tactics is it's working. We see that inflation is stemming. It was almost 10% at the beginning of the year, and now it's more close to the target. It's, I think, below 6%. It's on 6% on monthly, I think. Anyway, inevitably, a central bank would be forced to go into to soften monetary policy. But the major unknown here is state spending for the next year. I think so. FinMin and the government should roll out the new budget draft in the end of August, beginning of September. Then central bank will be sure what parameters of spending would be next year, and if they will be, as I said, 7% on military, 7% on social, and the rest on and 10% on the rest of the economy, I think the key rate will go down.
Since February 2022, it seems like the economy has played second fiddle for President Putin to winning the war in Ukraine from his viewpoint. What have been the concrete costs to the economy of this decision?
Well, first and foremost, economy lost its competitiveness on the long term. I mean, sanctions, besides limitations on Russian income, it puts they put a great burden in terms of technological deprivation. And I think if anyone desired that Russia would be at the technological forefront someday, well, these desires also were faded away, and Russia now is deemed to be at the technological backyard. And here we see very peculiar way how China shares the technology only on a certain extent. So it does. So China haven't rolled out their technological advance for Russia, which means that Russia would be more dependent on countries which are ready to sell to Russia something, and Russian internal domestic products would be less competitive on the globe, because if you are working only for domestic market, well, unless your market is Chinese size, usually that's not the great products you can provide. You can provide for the customers. So that's I think the major limitation on the economy. So that would be 100% economy of yesterday. And chances to become economy of tomorrow, chances to become advanced in AI, quantum computing, biotech, or any kind of advanced technologies are extremely low or even below zero.
You mentioned the very low unemployment rate in Russia, but many viewers might wonder, why is that a risk?
Because there is not enough workers to expand your manufacturing. For instance, you are an investor and you want to invest in Russia and to build a factory. You can do this, but there would be an empty space because you don't have people. You don't have enough workers to fill it, or you need to pay them enormous salaries. That's what's going on in Russia to lure them from other enterprises to yours, which means wages raise, which also means inflation for population, and it's not a healthy sign for the economy. And increased wages means that the cost of your production is also increasing, and you are losing market competitiveness because of the high labor cost. So that's a natural limitation of economic growth, and this limitation will persist regardless of the war, because demographic forecast for Russia is quite dire.
What are the factors leading to such a low availability of the workforce?
It is a combination of factors. First, bad demographic forecast, which was known to the Kremlin even before the war. So it wasn't a secret for neither for Putin nor for his government that the amount of workers will decrease. Second, it's war itself. It distracts people from the economy. Third is military industry complex, which works around the clock, and they can afford to pay high salaries to the workers. So they're soaking off a civil sector and distracting people from civil sector to the military one.
So those jobs are more attractive to these workers?
Yes, because military industry complex usually has access to cheap state funding. So in this wages race, they can easily win because they can allow them these labor costs. For civil part of the economy also tries, but sometimes but they are less fortunate in this. Then immigration, of course, is a factor. 650,000 people left Russia and never come back. It's not a big amount in terms of the whole labor force. It's less than 1%. But these were quite what we're saying, high-quality human capital, entrepreneurs, IT people, journalists, so like middle class and backbone of entrepreneur class, backbone of any advanced economy. Of course, also a factor that migrants inflow decreased this year because of the war and because of anti-migrant rhetoric, which now conducted by regional authorities in Russia. So it seems like they want to localize migrants in construction, and that's it. And the rhetoric is quite xenophobic, which doesn't make Russia an attractive market for migrants.
Energy is a major economic driver in Russia. Stepping back, there are now concerns that Iran could shut down the Strait of Hormuz, where a lot of oil, especially to Asia, comes out of. Does this present an energy opportunity to the Russian Federation?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that Iran wouldn't do this because all Iranian oil went through Strait of Hormuz, and it will first and foremost affect Iranian oil. Of course, in the short term, if this happens, and we already see a surge in oil prices, if this happens, oil prices go up, which fulfills Russian budget especially. Russia lost 14% of its oil revenues by this time already. But I think, but it's not so easy. So Russia, of course, can pump more and trying to fulfill niche liberated by Iran, for instance, to China. But it's not enough infrastructure yet. It requires tankers and so on and so forth. So it's not so easy. It's of course possible, but I couldn't say that Russia would be a winner of this oil market turmoil if it happens. So I hope the situation on oil markets will settle somehow and soon.
Do you expect the Trump administration to follow the pattern of the Biden administration and continue adding on sanctions, or can we expect an easing of sanctions in the Trump administration towards Russia?
I can say this way, that the way how now Trump administration cooperate with its European and UK allies in terms of sanctions was already a gift to Vladimir Putin, because previously there was a volunteer coordination between Western countries on sanctions, and now Europe are on their own, UK are on their own, and US thinking on something separate. So so it's definitely not the approach of Biden's administration. I think that sanctions will remain in place for a while. They are definitely, it's complicated to lift them all, and it's complicated to lift them partly either. That's not what Vladimir Putin wants, but it all depends on how long Putin can keep Trump's attention. That's still an open question.
The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum just wrapped. What kind, if any, international investment did Russia attract?
I don't think that there were any kind of real international investments. So all foreign money which are coming to Russia after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine are money which are Russian origin, but they are so previously they were invested to Russia via Cyprus or BVI or any other offshore jurisdictions. Now they can be from Kazakhstan, from UAE, from any other Gulf states, but they are basically Russian at their origin. There is no foreign investments. We don't see any direct investments from China. We don't see any direct investments from so-called Global South, which also an indicator that investors see Russia as unstable and non-investable country with the quite unstable investment climate, unpredictable investment environment, and they are not in a rush to put their money into Russia. And even if we compare the Russia nowadays and, for instance, Russia in zeros when it was very attractive for foreigners, the economy by then were growing. It was oil boom. It was new state, new regulations, and with the great hope of prosperity and liberation. So everyone believed that Putin building a liberal market economy. Now there is no such illusions anymore, and even high margins couldn't attract foreign investors because of the opposite. Your business could be seized, could be nationalized. Very easily. So that's not the environment that people are usually investing. And of course, Russia's drift towards protectionism, towards domestic producers, that's also a factor.
There is a possibility, though, at the moment it does look slim, that Russia and Ukraine could strike a peace deal this year. But what happens after the dust settles in the Russian economy? It seems like so much of it has moved to a war economy. What else would be left at that point?
I think not so much. So military expenditures will remain as elevated, as I said, because Putin needs military reconstitution. This means that the economy will work, but the economy will work as it worked before, but the uncertainty related to the war would be eliminated, and that would be a great relief for business and for policymakers.
As we saw earlier, Russia is planning to continue to spend a significant portion of its national budget on defense, even in the years to come. This, compared to Europe, Europe is not keeping pace at this point. Is the European Union ready for a potentially better armed and dug-in Russia in the years to come?
It's a good question, which better, I think, addressed to European Union. But anyway, even after the war, unfortunately, Russia wouldn't disappear from the map. The magical fence between Russia and European countries wouldn't appear. And yes, it's now absolutely clear that Putin is going to continue to arm his country, to arm his people, and he's at war with the West. So that's for sure the reality to which Europe should be prepared.
Alexandra Prokopenko, Carnegie Russia Eurasian Center, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.